Mailbag. We answer your questions about VA loan assumptions on this episode of Major Money Matters. All right, welcome back. Major Money Matters. Today, we're going to do something that's been pressing. We get a lot of questions about VA loan assumptions. First of all, hats off and shout out to all the realtors who call us to ask about this, all of our past clients who call us and have this conversation about, hey, is this something I should do, something I shouldn't do? How should I plan for it? And we have a lot of conversations about VA loan assumptions because, just where rates are right now. Before we get into that deeply, hey, welcome back, brother. How's it going?
Hey, things are going well. I mean, like you said, some unexpected phone calls about VA loan assumptions. We put out some content about VA loan assumptions. I think it was maybe about 6 months ago. And you never know who this content is hitting because we start getting phone calls like, hey, I'm in that situation. First thing I want to say is, number one, I am not a lawyer. Okay. We are mortgage brokers who discuss VA guidelines about mortgage broker activities. Okay.
Right.
So if you and your lawyer are having conversations in a divorce, then your lawyer should be the authority on the law.
We're also not, although we know a little bit about it, we're not title officers. So the conversation around your loan and your title could be two different conversations. For this purpose of this conversation, we do want to localize this a little bit. So let's have a conversation about VA loans. And if it comes up to something that, hey, you should talk to a title officer about, we'll refer somebody to you where you can get the answers that you need, because those answers change with individual states, and different rules. Marion, both you and I do loans in and outside of Texas. So we're talking about something in the state of Texas, community property state. We could be talking about a different situation in an Oklahoma, or Georgia or South Carolina or something like that. So let's get to it, man. Let's both of us get these questions. So we're just gonna kind of do round robin. Some of these are very interesting questions that we get around VA loans. So I'll pitch the first one to you. Should I do a VA loan assumption if I am divorcing and my spouse wants the property? Can he or she assume my VA loan? What's your take on that one? And first, let's build the foundation for the VA loan assumption, the VA loan itself, so we understand that every property, if it was bought with a VA loan or has a VA loan, has a veteran's entitlement, charged or occupied, or part of the veteran's entitlement occupied by that VA loan. Okay, so what's your take on this question particularly, Mary?
Well, I want to start with the second part of that question first. The second part of the question is, can he or she assume my VA loan? And the answer to that is yes, with caveats. Okay. Now, the first part of your question was, should I do a VA loan assumption? And the answer to that is a lot of it depends. Okay. So we're going to talk about the it depends parts of that, in order for you to decide, should you? Okay. So we won't necessarily answer that part of it for you, but can you? Yes. Now that has to do with whether or not your spouse is a veteran, or if your spouse is not a veteran. If your spouse is a veteran, then we can release the liability of the entitlement, and that entitlement can then go to the veteran. If that spouse is not a veteran, then the entitlement stays with the seller, or the original veteran on the VA loan. A VA loan has to have a VA home. And when I talk about a VA home, I'm talking about a person who is a veteran. The VA loan must be attached to a veteran in some way, shape, form, or fashion. You cannot exclude the veteran from the equation.
That's true. So there is a process that the VA has called a release of liability, as you say, Marion. And this is a form that you do and you submit to the VA to release one party or the other from liability. Okay. Now, if the VA releases the liability, now you still have to have a and the reason we're having this conversation is because many of the people who are, and we've got this question really more than once, because again, we're not lawyers. So the question of should you do this, that's a question of do you still like your spouse? Do you, I mean, how friendly are you guys on the outs? What does the rest of the divorce settlement look like? That's a should question. I mean, or how bad are you getting hammered here? So it's a question of, hey, should you do it? And everybody loves these, 2.25, 2.5 rates. And really, my opinion on rates are we're not angry because it ended. We rejoice because it happened. Because it's going to end at some point. You're going to give it up at some point. I mean, I gave up my 2.25 rate to move to Texas. Marion, you gave up your 2.25 rate to move to Texas. And we're not at 2.25 today. So what? But back to our point here is, can you do this? Yes, you can do it. Okay. There are certain caveats between if you're, like you said, Marion, if your spouse is a veteran or a non-veteran, how that process works. There's a release of liability form. You don't necessarily have to do a refinance to do this, but it is possible to do. And it depends on certain other factors of whether you actually should do this, which we're going to talk about later on. Another question like, hey, should I do a VA loan assumption or not? Or when should I not do it? Anything else you wanted to add on this question specifically regarding the VA loan assumption and a divorce, man?
Well, I wanted to highlight the most recent circular that has just come out, and that circular is 26-23-27, dated December 20th of 2023. So this thing is fresh. It's hot out the oven. It might burn your hands if you touch it. It is that fresh and hot. So there, there are so many times when people ask us questions and we say, hold on, wait a minute. The guidelines have recently changed on that. Let me review that and get back to you. And these are the type of situations that we're talking about because new circulars are released at a moment's notice. I mean, they're not promoting a release date like your favorite rap album or your favorite rap artist did in the 90s. They're just dropping them. This is a Beyonce sneak drop and it's hot. And we've just got to pick it up, read it, and translate it. But when they drop, they are effective immediately. So if you or your loan officer are not keeping up with circulars and drops, then you could be doing something that's outside of guidelines.
I like this circular because really this circular really it wasn't really new information. It kind of reiterated the veteran's right to, buying a home with a VA home loan entitlement is a right of the veteran. Also, selling the home with a VA home loan entitlement is a right of the veteran. So that process of doing a sale, having someone assume your VA loan, the fact that VA home loan is assumable, is a right of the veteran just as much as buying a home with 0% down is a right of the veteran also. So the circular really reinstated or reinforced the lender's responsibility to ensure that they're following the right guidelines and not turning down VA home loan assumptions, if due to certain overlays or something like that as a lender. And if you go back to our previous video that we talked about this on, Marion, we talked about the fact that, hey, there's the VA guidelines and every lender has overlays. Well, the circular comes out and the circular basically says, look, you have a responsibility. You can't have your overlays be so excessive that you're turning people away from doing a VA home loan assumption. There was a lender, and I don't know if they've released this or not. There was a lender, I think it was Flagstar, and they had a overlay of 41% on a debt to income ratio. So if you're a veteran who was assuming that loan, or whoever was assuming that loan, is at an overlay of 41% or had a DTI of 41%, which we know we can do DTIs of VA loans, 55, 60 DTI, and they're, that's not putting the veteran in a bad position. Certainly there are certain ways where we structure loans where that might make sense. For example, if you have only one spouse on the loan, but the DTI is 60, is that really in a bad spot? No, you got the other spouse who has an income, we're just leaving them off the loan. So, but those overlays, so this circular was really important, just reinforcing the fact that this is the veteran's right to do a VA home loan assumption, or to have someone buy with a assumption. And also, if the veteran feels mistreated, it laid out some guidelines on what they can do to challenge the denial of the VA home loan assumption. So, but back to our point, divorce. Can you do it? Sure, you can. Certain little caveats. We need to figure out the details to get there. All right. Number 2, do I get my entitlement back if I allow someone to assume my VA loan?
Well, that depends. That depends on whether or not the person assuming the loan is a veteran or not a veteran. If it is a veteran, you can transfer the entitlement to the veteran receiving the loan. If that person is not a veteran, then the entitlement stays with the person who originally had the loan. And it does not go to the person assuming the loan, because again, I say a VA loan has to have a VA home, and that home being the veteran.
So I had this happen actually, Mary, and I don't even think I shared this with you. I had a client who was selling their house in Hawaii, and they had, I've actually had 2 different situations. The first situation was, you say if they're a veteran, it transfers. Well, if it transfers, if that veteran has enough entitlement remaining for it to transfer. If that veteran does not have enough entitlement remaining, then you're short. And really, when you're making a purchase, you can go over the remaining entitlement and you pay a fourth of the amount. You go over the remaining entitlement if you're doing something like that on a purchase. That is possible to do. But on a VA home loan assumption, if you are $100 short on the entitlement, sorry, you can't pay the $100. You really have to have the amount of entitlement remaining. So that's one situation we had like that, where there wasn't the veteran didn't have enough entitlement remaining, and that client, they fell out of escrow because they couldn't do the transfer, and they didn't want to do a normal VA loan. And the other thing is, if you the other situation was the veteran who was buying or making the offer, my client had a 2.25% rate on their home. They wanted to buy the home, but they wanted my clients, who, by the way, they're 27, I think. They wanted my client to leave their VA entitlement on the home until they refinanced, okay, or they sold that house. Let me ask you a question. If somebody has a 2.25% interest rate on a house, what's the likelihood they're going to refinance?
There's no motivation to refinance that into a 6%.
No, there's no motivation to finance that into a 3.5% if rates go there. Why would I refinance and move my interest rate, 3 point or a full point up, unless there's something I really want to do, a cash out refinance or something like that, if it's allowed in that state. So really, yeah, you can do this and you can get your entitlement back, but selling your house and the transfer of the entitlement is 2 very different things. The transfer of the entitlement happens at the lender or at the VA. Selling the house is just you selling the house. And this gets back to our other question, Marion, that we get sometimes. Hey, can I do a VA home loan assumption on an investment property?
Okay.
Or can I buy that home if I'm an investor? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, so the VA loan itself is not for investment for investment at all. There must be a primary residence if you're using a VA loan.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to buy, so can an investor assume that VA loan? The answer to that question is yes, they can. However, that entitlement is going to stay with the person who with that seller. So it would be, frankly, pretty asinine for you to allow an investor to buy your property using your VA loan, and your VA loan's tied up there. Now, I will tell you, I have a client who's letting someone use their VA loan. They're in their home. They are 70 something years old. They're in their home that they're in right now. They have a VA loan on a previous home. They don't plan on moving. They're going to stay in their house till the end of their days. And they're saying, hey, I'm willing to let somebody assume this loan. And I don't care who it is, because I'm not using my VA anymore. Okay, so that veteran can certainly do that. But keep in mind, if you're somebody who's still in the moving and the building phase, you'd be insane, really, to let somebody hang on to your VA home loan entitlement. Okay. What's our next question, Marion?
So the next question is, how long must I wait to purchase again if someone assumes my VA loan?
So this is the answer is you can pretty much purchase immediately. Usually it's kind of like the same of like if you're doing a sale, if you're selling and you're selling one home on a VA loan, and then you're buying a home on a VA loan, and assuming you don't have remaining entitlement and all that stuff and all those other stuff, you really need to sell that home in order to get this new home. You can do this pretty much immediately after the entitlement transfers over to the new veteran. Okay. So keep in mind, if you're doing a VA home loan assumption and you're doing a purchase, typically you have multiple different hands in the pot. If let's say you're selling your house in South Carolina and you're doing an assumption on somebody's assuming your loan on that house, then you're moving to Georgia and you're buying that house, you likely have two different lenders. There's some coordination there that has to happen. And there's some kinks that could happen. So, but technically by the book, you can actually, buy, the next day after you sell your home, if the lender okays it. What are your thoughts on that? Anything you want to add there?
Yeah. So everything is done at the lender. Everything is pretty much done at the lender, and then it is submitted to the VA. So the VA has 10 days. The VA has 10 business days after a completed package is submitted to them from the lender. Okay. So the lender gets everything together. You close, lender has everything together. You've been funded, all of those things, or the loan has been funded. And then they get that package to the VA. From that point, VA has 10 days to change entitlement, to make a decision on everything the VA has to do from that point on. And then after that point, all right, everything is in line for that veteran to then move forward with their life. But the lender can still do the transaction and everything that needs to be done even before it's submitted to the VA. I hope I'm clear on that.
Yeah. So what you're saying, somebody might be listening like, hey, you guys are saying two different things. No, we're not saying two different things. Marion's talking about by the book what happens at the VA and what the timelines are as they are written. However, many of the lenders we work with are willing to do this immediately because they know, hey, everything's in place and we know the VA is going to do this. We just have to, we're willing to take on that risk and not make the veteran wait, 10 days or something like that, because we know we package everything and everything's in order. So, So, all right. Next question. When is a VA assumption a good idea if you are a seller?
I can't say it ever is. It is something you can do, certainly, but just because you can do it does not mean that it is a good idea to do it.
Yeah.
If you really want to help somebody, or if that person is someone I don't know, man. I use words that other people might not identify the same way, but if it's someone that you really love and care for, and you want to secure a home for them, and they have no other means of securing financing for that home, but you really want them to have your home, then yes, it would be good for you to do a VA loan assumption for them.
Yeah.
But I can't think of any other situation where, and brother, you might have something better for me, but I can't think of any other situation where a VA loan assumption would be a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that it's not a good idea. It's like, what's the next best option? Okay. So the reason that we have so much of this going on right now is because you can use the VA, the assumability factor is, is something that people are marketing. So, the fact that it can be assumed, is really something that people like. So if you're selling a property and it's at, it's in the twos on interest rates, but if somebody goes out and gets a VA loan, like at normal market rates today, you're in either the high fives, low sixes, depending on your scenario as of this day. And you might want to do, if you're doing that, then that I need this in order to be marketable. I do loans in Hawaii, Marion, you don't, but those higher price points, when you start getting up to 700, 800, 900, 1,000 million plus on VA loans, that monthly payment at 6% is different than that monthly payment at 2%, substantially different than that monthly payment at 2%. So you might do a VA home loan assumption in that place because it's the way to get your house off the market and get your house sold. If interest rates are at 3, you would not be doing VA home loan assumptions because they take so much longer than a normal purchase, and it's a lot of headache. So when is my answer to when is the VA loan assumption a good idea as a seller? It's when you have no other reasonable options. That is my answer. I won't say it's not a good idea. Now, if you're, like you said, Marion, if you're doing this for a family member or something like that, somebody you really love and you want to give them the best possible deal, you might do a home loan assumption. And by the way, you need to go back to look at our other video that we talk about this. Keep in mind, they are assuming the loan. They're not assuming the purchase price. Okay. You're assuming the loan portion. So you got to have a difference, a way to come up with that delta. All right, Marion, what's our next question here?
Is the VA assumption always a better deal than purchasing at today's rates?
This is an interesting one. So there are other factors that go into a VA home loan assumption rather than just the purchase itself. We're talking timelines. Okay, do I have the time to do this? Do I have the difference in cash to do this? But the other thing that people sometimes don't understand and they don't consider is what I like to refer to as the blended interest rate. Okay, let's say you're assuming a loan. Let's say you're at 50% of the value. Let's say you're selling a house for $600,000, and you're marketing, hey, you have a $300,000 loan on the property, and it's available at 2%, just for round numbers. Okay, let's say you're available at 2%. And you can go get a second lien or a second mortgage or a HELOC or whatever. And that HELOC is going to be at 7%. Okay. Just to throw a number out there. Okay. So you're going to have $300,000 at 2% and then $300,000 at 7%. The real interest rate there is somewhere in the middle at about 5.5. Is that right? 3,
right.
or sorry, 2 and then 5. That's a difference of 5. I count that out, 2.5. Okay, so I'm at 4.5% is my blended rate. Okay, so if that's the case, and I'm at 4.5%, but I can go get a VA loan off the shelf, normal market rates at 5%, the difference between 4.5 and 5, okay, maybe I even buy down to a 4.5, and because I have so much, so I have cash or whatever. Look, it's not really, people don't look at the blended rate. So they get so fixated on, oh, the mortgage is at 2%. Well, yeah, but you got to get a second lien. Maybe you're giving up your cash. And if you're paying cash, there's an opportunity cost to that money. You're taking money out of investments that you could be making 10, 12% on in the market, and you're putting it half on a mortgage. There are so many different other factors around when you start looking at this thing around this. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it does not. So that's something I want people to understand. All right, Marion. Hey, last question here we have. Last question is, if I am a realtor, okay? If I am a realtor, what should I know about? And first of all, again, shout out to the realtors who call us up and ask us questions before they go in escrow, before they start marketing this on the MLS. People call us up and ask us questions all the time from all over. And we really appreciate it, just having the conversation strategically with you on this. But Marion, if you're a realtor, what advice do you have about VA loan assumptions if you're a realtor?
The advice I have about VA loan assumptions, if I'm a realtor, is to call a lender. Call a VA lender, okay? Your answer to your buyer is, I would love to answer that question, but I don't want to steer you wrong. Here's the phone number, or if we're in the process, you already have somebody has already done a pre-approval for you or something to that effect. You're already working with a qualified VA lender. Call and have a conversation with that VA lender if I'm going to have a conversation about VA loan assumptions as a realtor.
And it goes back to, when I'm talking to my agents, my realtor partners that I work with, I tell them, if you are selling, some people really think that buying a house is a pre-approval is a home buyer step. No, I say it's a home buyer and a home seller step too, because you got to know when you go into this transaction, how's the next purchase going to look? You don't sell a house to go live on the street. So you gotta have another house to go into. How's that transaction going to look? How's that process going to look? You don't want to be in a situation where you're in a tough spot because you didn't plan for the VA home loan assumption, for this to happen and all that stuff. I can tell you, I've seen people lose houses and lose earnest money. Let's say you're building a new build. You're building from one place to the other, and your VA home loan assumption, somebody told you shouldn't take more than 90 days because somebody just wanted to get you into escrow and tell you whatever. This ends up taking 4 or 5 months. You got a new house that you're trying to build, but the new house you're trying to build, the builder says, look, I'm going to give you a 15-day extension and then I'm going to cancel your contract. You're losing your earnest money because you can't get your home sold and your purchases continued. You have to have a plan. I mean, you got to know what your entrance and exit strategy is when you're doing this. But so I agree with you, brother. I mean, when you're talking about this whole process, you need to have a lender and probably do a Zoom meeting, talk this out. Hey, let's talk this out. Let's figure out how this process is going to work. What should I be expecting? And when you have a lender, as far as me and you also need to have the conversation with the lender that has the loan. And go back and watch our previous video if you didn't see it on VA home loan assumptions. If you need to have a conversation with the lender who has the loan, because they are in control of this process, and it's so important that you understand how their process works, their timeline works to get you in this situation.
I have something to add to that, and I said this in the previous video, but it bears stating again that each lender has their own set of overlays as it pertains to VA loan assumptions. Each lender does VA loan assumptions differently. So just because you went through any other lender that I won't name, some of them in the news right now for some discrimination practices and things like that. If you went to any of those lenders, they are going to have different overlays concerning VA loan assumptions. Now, the VA is here to make sure they follow the guideline, but they can follow the guideline with their overlays. So one lender might take 60 days to do it. Another lender might take 90 days to do it. Another lender might take 110 days to do it. So you really should I ever do a VA loan assumption? Should I ever? Major, I'm gonna direct that one to you. I didn't even break it up, but it just happened to come in the form of my answer. Should I ever do this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's sometimes it makes sense, but sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I like the low interest rates on the VA home loan assumptions, but sometimes it's just a headache to get through, and it can be an ordeal and an emotional challenge.
Give me a percentage of likelihood of it making sense versus not making sense.
Kind of hard to say because it depends on the area. If I'm if I'm buying a four bedroom, 3-bath house in Hawaii, like Oahu, where I do a fair degree of my business still. If I'm in the $1 million range, yeah, I'm making some sacrifices to fight for that interest rate if I have the cash to cover the difference, between the loan amount and the purchase price. So I can't give you a percentage of like, hey, does it make sense or does it not make sense? But if you look at this just based on the interest rate, I can tell you that you're probably making a poor total assessment. You have to look at things based on interest rate, timelines, do I have the cash? Do I want a HELOC? Do I want a second lien? All of those things, you have to look at those things individually and see, whether it makes sense from a totality standpoint.
Yeah. Well,
right,
I think we talked about this longer than we wanted to, but we got some good things. So we got some good things out.
Yeah, but I mean, we get questions about this all the time, it's hitting our inbox and everything, and we try to get this out, as much as we can. But our goal is to help veterans and help realtors really understand this process. And as more and more people are starting to do this, even right now, rates are coming down, which is great. But it's going to be, I think, VA loan assumptions are going to hang around for a while because you have these people who have rates in the 2s, even the low 3s potentially, and people want those interest rates. So it's going to be interesting. But thanks for joining me, brother. Really appreciate it. And for those of you guys that are out there listening to this, hey, keep hitting us up. We're here to help. Here to do everything we can to help you be successful in this market and help you serve veterans better. God bless you. See you next time on Major Money Matters.